Thank you for the inspiration, choir and choir director. Jesus gives us two words, two positive, affirmative, proactive words, light and salt, to show us the way. A novice joined a Tibetan monastery, and he took a vow of silence at this particular monastery where he was only permitted to say two words every 5 years. Tough. After 5 years, he appeared before the elders, and they asked him what he wished to say. He said, "Food cold." 2 words. So they took care of that. 10 years later, he appeared before them again. The elders asked him what he wished to say. He said, "Bed hard." So they gave him a pillow. After 15 years, he appeared before them again. When asked for his 2 words, he said, "I'm leaving." "About time," the head monk said. "All you've done since you've arrived is complain." Well, I've heard a lot of complaining lately from friends, from acquaintances, from Facebook, from even churchgoers. Today, Jesus gives us 2 metaphors to show us how to live. 2 words, light and salt, 2 metaphors to say what goodness God has given you, you are to give to others. You are here to be the light that brings out the God colors in this world. You are here to be the salt seasoning that brings out the God flavors of this world. 2 positive words, light and salt. There are 2 types of people. One, wherever he goes, people say, "Thank God." And 2, whenever he goes, people say, "Thank God." The book, The Road to Character, by David Brooks, explains that there are 2 ways people think of themselves: as the big me or the summoned self. The big me thinks of himself or herself as the center of the universe. A lot of that going around. The summoned self seeks to be the person that God calls forth out of us. As Paul said in his letter, God's Spirit summoning our spirit, that the goodness that we have within us can bring light to the darkness, to bring healing for somebody who's hurting, to be the salt of the earth. Now, this author says another way to think of yourself is in terms of a resume or a eulogy, which I thought was quite interesting. A resume is something that you prepare for a prospective employer, stating your skills, your experience in the job market, your education, all about your external successes. Comparing that to when someone gives your eulogy at your funeral. They'll talk about something deeper, I hope. The core of your being. He was brave. She was kind and generous. They talk about your relationships. Which one is a truer depiction of you? Are you a walking resume or a walking eulogy? I remember reading a very confused Mark Twain, who wrote for his own funeral, "I want to go to heaven for the climate, but hell for the company." Henry David Thoreau said, "The only thing he feared more than death is having never really lived in the first place." And of course, my favorite eulogy story, I cannot depart this without saying it again, is about the flower shop that messed up a couple of deliveries. One went to a new business opening, the other went to a funeral. Well, the first guy complained on the phone, "What's wrong with you sending a flower arrangement with condolences on it written to a new business. And the florist answered, "You think you're mad? The flowers I sent to the funeral said, 'Good luck at your new location.'" Anyway, the point being is a resume is about how many sales we can make. But a eulogy describes the kind of person you are. She was the salt of the earth. He was a light in dark times. Salt represents influence. Salt represents flavor, as we said to the kids. Christianity lends flavor to life. Unfortunately, we've all known Christians who, sort of act the opposite. They take the joy out of life. Perhaps you're thinking of maybe a knuckle-slapping nun of your past, or a fundamentalist preacher who's quick to send others to hell. Oliver Wendell Holmes once said, "I might have entered the ministry if certain clergy I knew hadn't looked and acted so much like undertakers." We need to discover the radiant joy of the Christian faith, so that in a worried world we can remain serene. In a confused world we can remain clear-headed. In a fearful world we can continue to trust. How many people do you walk up to and talk to in a day? Are you the light? Are you the salt? Are you a smile, a listening ear, an encouraging word? We were at a school conference once, and the teacher just mentioned in passing that her husband was facing an upcoming surgery, and Christy and I assured her, "Hey, we'll say a prayer for him." She looked astonished. "Well, wow, thanks," she said. Like a small bit of salt that flavors the dish it is in, Jesus is telling his disciples they will have an effect on those around him. Like a tiny light in a dark room, Jesus is saying we can make a huge difference. Like little photons of goodness in an evil world. Christ's disciples beam and bounce off others and transmit holy energy to them. Like light waves traveling out to someone, perhaps someone who's fighting their way through a hellish illness, wearing a prayer shawl that you gave her, that comforts her and warms her even from miles away. Like salt, a stable substance with positive and negative ions, we will be able to season and enrich an entire community. Like our warming fence with scarves and hats on it, or the food pantry, or the huge stained glass window back there that I'm sure brings joy to thousands of people who drive by it on Chicago Street. But Jesus is not just preaching the power of positive change, nice as it is. I believe he's saying something more, something important when he uses the metaphors of salt and light. He is talking about the true light and life of the kingdom of God. And he's talking to us, the church. When Jesus said, "You are the light, you are the salt," the "you" in this passage is plural. We don't even really have a word for it in our English language, except, of course, for down south. You all. Y'all are the light. Y'all are the salt. Y'all are his followers and disciples. A faith that stops at the church doors is not much use to anybody. Our Christianity is something which is meant to be seen and felt and tasted and heard at home, at work, in the car, on the beach, everywhere we are, even on the golf course. Y'all are the light and the salt of the world. And there are many who need you, who need your strength, because they may not have enough strength of their own to get through something tough. This is the 75th anniversary year of the liberation of Auschwitz. And I think of the story of the rabbi celebrating Hanukkah. And he looked for a candle of hope to set up in the prison camp. And he decided to use the last little pat of butter that they had for the candle and for the recitation of the Torah. His son objected, "But Dad, that butter, that's the last of it." And Dad replied, "We can live without butter, but we cannot live without hope." The world cannot live without hope. Live your life, the summoned self. Live out your own eulogy. Be the light, be the salt to those who desperately need it, because Jesus is counting on y'all. Amen.